Hi, my name is Ngozi, and thank you for coming to listen to my presentation. My topic is Regional Transportation District Site Hazard Identification Report. And this is about my visit to the Regional Transportation District site at 1900 34th Street in Denver on the 31st of January of the year 2020. And I'm going to present some of the site hazards I observed and discuss some of the solutions and some of the safety and ergonomic solutions to these hazards. So this is the outline of my, what I'm going to present. So I'm going to talk about the industry, then the company, and then the safety hazards and ergonomic hazards. So the industry is the Regional Transportation District, which was established in 1969 by the Colorado General Assembly, and but it began operations in 1972. And what it does is that it provides public transportation to the people that live within the district, which is a regional transportation district. And it does this through bus and light rail services. And these operations put this company within the transportation sector of occupations and industries according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics as of 2019. And people employed within the transportation industry approximately are over 28,000 individuals within the United States as of 2019. And there are so many occupations within this industry. And this depends on the mode of transportation because there are different modes of transportation. It could be air, land, and water transportation. So this determines the type of occupations there are. So if you're talking about air, you're looking at things like pilots, aeronautical engineering, people that load the cargoes in the plane. We are talking about people that shape goods that are ultimately loaded in the planes. You're talking about flight hostesses and all of that. And then in terms of land transportation, you're looking at drivers that drive cars or buses, or people that freight goods, warehousing. You're looking at automotive repairers, mechanics, people that work in body shops, tire workers. And then if you're talking about land, you're talking about water transportation, then you're talking about people that operate ships, and then people that work on the ships, the engineers, sailors that work on the ships, and then people that engineers that repair the ships. And then you're talking about railway, then you talk about people that operate the railway engineers and all of that. So there are different industries, different occupations within this industry, depending on the mode. But one thing that is interesting is that this industry, the workers are predominantly male, about 77% male, and then majority are over 25 years and older, 87%, over 87% are 25 years or older. The median age is actually 43 years. And then because of the type of work that is done, there are different types of operations that go on in this industry. So it exposes these workers to numerous hazards, which predisposes them to different types of injuries. And if appropriate controls are not placed, they are subject to having a lot of injuries. So in 2019, the total recordable cases of non-fatal injuries, these are injuries that did not result in death or illness, but resulted in some injury or illness, was 4 injuries per every 100 worker that has full-time work. So out of every 100 workers that had full-time work, you have 4 injuries. And then for number of days that were lost as a result of injury or illness, or those that had job restriction, that's those that had their job restricted or had them transferred to another job as a result of illness, was 208.3 out of every 10,000 workers that had full-time work. Then if you're still looking at those that had injuries that did not result in death, now looking at those that work in transportation industries now, only transportation industries in 2018. So the most common type of injuries were sprains and strains and tears. So this is the most common type of injuries. These are usually muscular injuries or ligament type of injuries that are usually due to falls or slips, when muscles or ligaments are strained or stretched. So the next type is by far less is soreness or pain, and then followed by these other ones, which are much smaller. But by far is sprains, strains, and tears. Then if you're looking at injuries that cause death in transportation industry, all types of it, then injuries that cause death, looking at all types of occupation, for all occupation, construction is the highest, but transportation and warehousing, you see where transportation and warehousing, that's the second number in terms of number and rate. Transportation sector came in second in number and rate of injuries that resulted in death. So at 14 deaths per 10,000 full-time employers, and the number of deaths as of 2018 was 874 deaths in 2018. So 874 people died in the transportation industry, and out of that 874 deaths, 643 were due to transportation incidents. So transportation incidents was responsible for the most deaths in the transportation incidents caused the most deaths in the transportation industry. So now going to talk about the company, the Regional Transportation District, the company. So this district is a specialized transportation district that was carved out of the statute passed by the state government that conferred this district with its own taxing power. And they have a 15-member board that has a legal authority over it, and they even elect the chief executive, and they're also the overall governing body of this district. So this district serves over 3 million individuals and over 40 municipalities and over 8 counties that include Denver metro area. So this area covered in this map, so that's the district. That's where the buses and the light rail service that the RTD operates, that's where they cover. So the other counties are Weld, Jefferson, Western Arapahoe, Western Adams, Northern Adams, Boulder, I think Broomfield, and Denver and Western Arapahoe are the other counties that are included in this, partly or wholly covered in this RTD. So the bus and light rails that are used to operate, the buses that they use to operate the services are about 1,026 wheelchair operated, wheelchair equipped buses, and 589 of these buses are owned and operated by RTD, while 437 are owned by RTD, but they have private companies that operate them, and they indicated that the numbers and they have certain indications of numbers that they write on them, or letters, that they use to indicate on the signs of them that indicate which ones are owned by RTD and which ones are privately owned. And the operation of the buses are regulated by Federal Transit Administration. While the light rails began operation in 1994, and currently they have 172 vehicles and cover 58.5 miles of track, and they have 54 stations that they cover. The light rail, the commuter light rail, started operation in 2016 they started with the A line, and they started servicing the Denver International Airport, and currently they have 66 vehicles and they cover 40 miles of track and 17 stations. So they have, they cover every weekday, they cover 141,651 miles, but by yearly, every year the number of miles they cover amounts to about 443 million and 800 some over 800,000 miles every year. And the light rails operation is regulated by the Federal Railroad Administration, which is under the Department of Transport. The Federal Transportation Administration is also under the Department of Transportation as well. They are both agencies that are under the Department of Transportation. The RTD employs 2,888 workers. 870 of these workers are salaried workers, while 2,018 of them are union workers. They also have some private contractors, some of which are fixed route workers and some are paratransit workers. So some of the safety hazards I observed. So during my visit, we observed the workers doing their work, and we observed some, things that were well done, that were being done properly, and then there were also a few things that we observed that, were not so well done, and some are also that we want to commend the workers doing very well as well. So some of the things that one thing that I noticed was the fall hazard. Fall hazards are one of the commonest causes of accidents or injuries and death in workplaces, especially in the transportation industry. As of 2018, 15% of occupational fatalities was as a result of falls, slips, and trips. If you look at this chart, in transportation industry, this is where falls, slips, and trips fall. This is 15% of all the fatalities that occurred in 2018. And these are hazards caused by tripping, people climbing ladder and falling off, or sitting, when you fall off a chair, or when you slip and fall, or you fall from not catching a hold of something, or you fall upstairs, or you trip on something, or fall, so all these are things that can cause people to fall, cause hazards that lead to the injury. So one of the conditions, the hazards, so when this is the shop where the bus pit, where the work is done on the buses. So we came through this door. You can see where these two people are standing. These are one of the guys that took us around, and this is one of the people that we came with. So we came through this door, and you can see the space where these people are standing. Immediately you open this door and come through. There's not much space left between you and this bus pit. But I noticed that there wasn't any sign on the other opposite side of this door. So immediately I opened the door, walked through. The next thing I saw was this open bus pit. There was nothing to warn somebody coming through that there was this open bus pit here. And I felt this was a hazard for fall, because somebody coming here for the first time without noticing that there was this open pit here could fall through, fall in here and get injured. So I felt that there should have been a sign to warn somebody at the other side of this door that there was this bus pit here. We walked through and saw these stores where materials are stored, parts are stored in this area, and also in these places where things are stored. And I believe ladders are used to pick up all these parts are stored here. So if those ladders are not properly used, they could also constitute fall risk. But I saw that those are some other things that could constitute fall risk. So solutions to reduce fall risk, 3 OSHA standards could be applied. So one is the 1910.22. So this one provides requirements for walking and working surfaces to make sure that any walking or working surfaces is kept clean and clear, that there's no clutter, that there's no grease, there's no water, and the passageways are free of any dirt or debris. And 1910.23, this one is to make sure that to guard the floor and wall opening and holes, to make sure that they are not posing any hazard for people to fall through them. Then 1910-26, this is the general specification for care and use of any portable metal ladders. So additional things that could be done to improve, to reduce this hazard is to eliminate any floor opening or burst pits near doors. You could have burst pits, but make sure that, if they could not be eliminated near doors, at least you could place color-coded markings or signs or labels to provide warnings to people that are approaching them or approaching the doors or approaching these entrances that are next to the bus pits, that these bus pits are just on the opposite side of the door, so that the person will be aware of them. And then good lighting is also very important for visualization of all the surfaces and the floors. So especially areas that have transition, like step down or any place that has step off or change in consistency of the floor should be properly lighted. Then slip-resistant floors and footwear is also very important for workers. And other essential personal protective equipment or PPE should be provided to workers that work at height, especially when workers are climbing up to retrieve materials from those shelves. They should be wearing appropriate hardware so that if for any reason they should fall, they should protect themselves from injury. So the next hazard I saw was mechanical hazard. So we're walking past this equipment. So I saw this equipment that was not guarded. And if this equipment is used, the worker's hand could be cut in there, it could be pinched. So mechanical hazards usually result from use of equipment that could result in contact of the operator's body part with the point of operation. And this could, any of these points of operations could result in mechanical hazards and could cause cutting or laceration or stabbing or puncture or shearing or drawing in or trapping or entanglement or crushing, or shearing. So any time that somebody's body part comes in contact with a point of operation, that could happen. So in 2018, 15% of occupational fatalities resulted in transportation industry due to contact with equipment. So this is quite significant as well. So solutions, some of the solutions is the OSHA standard 1910-212. This is machine guarding or safeguarding. And this is to minimize the worker contact with the point of operation. Another things that RTD could do is to make sure that workers cover their hair, or workers do not wear long chains or long jewelry or long clothing when they are working. So it's good that I saw that all the workers in RTD wear uniform, which is good because they all wear the same thing and nobody's wearing any other kind of clothes. So RTD is already doing very well, and the workers wear they wear gloves and they cover their hair, and so they wear the right PPE, which is good because they protect themselves from snag hazards like long loose hair or facial hair that could get caught in equipment, or wearing long loose jewelry, which is also risky. And employers should ensure that the workers are trained and supervised at the work sites to ensure that they are using the equipment properly, and also provide them with appropriate equipment, appropriate PPE. Another hazard I saw, another safety hazard is chemical hazard. So when we were walking through, I saw this bottle, this container, plastic container that was lying on the table. I did not know what was in it. There was no labeling on it. It's colored. I don't know what is in there. So any chemical that is in a workshop should be properly labeled. But this was not. So in 2018, 3,790 non-fatal chemical burns or corrosions occurred, and 621 or 11.9%, almost 12% of fatal exposures occurred due to chemical exposures in the transportation industry. And so this is quite substantial, over 10%, almost 12% of fatalities result in the transportation industry from chemical or exposure to dangerous or harmful environments. So this could be in the form of mists or vapors or gases or dust or fumes. And these toxic exposures can occur when somebody, takes it in by mouth or through skin absorption or by injection when you get injected through your bloodstream, or by inhalation when you inhale it by, through your nose. And the amount is very important. The quantity that your body takes in is very important, because that could determine the effect the hazardous chemical could have, because that could determine if you're going to have an acute effect. And acute is immediate, it happens immediately, or chronic. Chronic is, it takes time, it may happen after a long time of continuous slow exposure. So some of the solutions, the OSHA standard, there are 3 standards that could be applied to reduce the exposure to these hazards. So the first one I'm going to talk about is 1910-119. So this is how to safely manage highly hazardous chemicals in order to prevent the release of this hazardous chemical. So when there's a hazardous release of a chemical, so this is how you manage it and improve the process management. And then the next one is 1910-120, which is called Hazardous Waste Operations and Emergency Response, or HAZWOP, which is what happens when there's a chemical spill. So when there's a chemical spill, you either do 2 things. The first one is you can manage it internally as a company, like RTD. If there's a chemical spill in RTD, RTD can manage it internally, or they can manage it externally by making sure they secure their workers and then call in an outside management company to come and help them clear the chemical spill. But there are two types of management emergency response, that they need to have, depending on which one they want to adapt. So that's how this HAZWOP helps you to determine which one you want to implement. Then the next standard is chemical hazard information. That one is you have to have information for any chemical you're using in your facility. You have to have information about that chemical. So you have to have the safety data sheet on that chemical. You have to provide it for your workers so that they will know what the chemical is and how to manage it and what it does, or how it, the chemical properties of that chemical. And then and what to do if there's any exposure, like how to call the poison control and all of that. And then the work processes for the work could be redesigned to minimize exposure of the workers to the chemical, because if you can redesign the work processes, you could reduce the exposure of the workers to the chemicals. And if possible, eliminate those hazardous chemicals, or even substitute them, for a less hazardous chemical, or to a non-hazardous chemical that could still do the same function that the other chemical was already doing before. And then the employer should provide PPEs and things, other things like fume hoods that the workers can wear to protect themselves, and things like masks and respirators and goggles to protect themselves, and other PPE that are appropriate. So the next hazard I'm going to talk about is ergonomic hazards. So some ergonomic hazards that I observed while we're working about. So I'm going to discuss 3 of them. So I must say that RTD was doing a good job, in terms of ergonomics, taking care of the workers in some of them. But there are also a few things that they could do to improve ergonomics there, so we're going to discuss some of that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is excessive repetition and duration of effort. This is because most of the work that is done in RTD by the mechanics, especially in the mechanic shop and the body shop, most of them are done by hand. So the excessive repetition are work that are usually done by hand and require short cycle motions, usually things that are done under 30 seconds and then that are done repeatedly, continually repeated. So like this guy that was working, he uses all the small tools to, work on the parts of this bus. So over time of continually doing all this small work, turning, screws and turning, all these tools and twisting them, so he could sustain, expose himself to this type of hazard. And some of the things that could be done is to, some of the solution is to, there's really no ergonomic standard for now. But some of the solution include the use of the general duty clause, which is whereby OSHA states that the employer should ensure that the workers are working in a safe environment that does not cause them harm. So there's also the OSHA ergonomic standard. This is a voluntary guide for employers. So it helps them, it's a way to guide employers to fulfill their obligation to meet the OSHA Act in terms of ergonomics for the workers. So RTD is already using some engineering controls, like using motorized lifts, using power tools. So additional things that they can do is to implement things like engineering controls. Is to implement some administrative controls like schedule, rotation changes. So like for this guy that does this type of work, he can do some scheduled rotation shifts. So instead of continuing to do this type of work continuously, maybe this week he does this type of work, then next week he can rotate to a different type of task so that he doesn't continue to do the same thing. So by rotating his task and doing a different thing, he can relieve himself of continuously exposing himself to the same hazard. And then offering mini breaks could also allow workers time to rest and reduce the risk of continuous exposure. And then the work process can also be redesigned and diversified to reduce muscle fatigue, and also keeping the wrists working in a neutral position so that the wrist is not working in a position that is not neutral. So this will reduce the injury, the risk of injury and the risk of developing musculoskeletal disorder as well. So the next hazard is hand vibration. So this hazard, I observed this hazard while walking around. When we were passing the tire shop, I saw a worker that was working in the tire shop that was using the powered impact wrench, and he was removing nuts and bolts from a tire. So the power tool was really vibrating at such a speed that was shaking the worker's hands, and in fact, the vibration was transmitting to much of his body, but mostly in his hands. And that type of vibration over time could actually cause some, significant damage to him. And that can cause what is called hand-arm vibration syndrome. And this is a type of damage that affects the nerves and blood vessels in the arm, in the hands and fingers. So over time, the person experiences a type of injury that seems like it appears like white. The person has like loses sensation and the circulation in their fingers, especially when they expose themselves to cold weather. They don't have good circulation in their fingers, especially fingertips turn white when they're in cold weather. So it looks like they have Raynaud's, I don't know, something that appears like Raynaud's disease. If you've ever seen that or heard of that, that's what it looks like. But it's from operating tools, power tools that cause a lot of vibration, like chainsaws or power drills, or any tool that vibrates, many years of, operating tools like that. So according to the American College of Governmental Environment in Industrial Hygiene, they said that for best practices, the limits that they recommend for exposure to vibration, for hand vibration, is 5 meters per second square, for during a particular shift as of 2016. So that's their recommendation. And the solution for this is also the same. to make general duty clause to make sure that the workers are working in an environment where they are safe and they are not exposed to harm, and then the ergonomic standard, of course. So based on this, RTD will need to implement a medical surveillance program for these workers, so that the workers, these workers that are using these vibrating hand tools, so that they will be monitored and surveilled to make sure that they are not developing any injuries. And then the surveillance will also help to determine when these injuries start developing, so that appropriate measures could be taken if they begin to develop any signs of this condition. Then it's important to also inform these employers of the supervisors and the management of RTD and the workers as well. Provide them information about symptoms of hand and vibration syndrome, so that they will know what it is and understand what it is, so that if these workers start developing it, they will also know what it is and be able to identify it, and appropriate measures should be taken. And it's important to eliminate the vibrating power tools if it's possible, to eliminate it, completely, or at least acquire or buy tools that are not vibrating so much, or that do not, or the ones that alternatives that do not vibrate so much, or maybe brands that do not vibrate so much. And then it's also important to keep the tools, the work equipment, in very good working condition, because if the tools are in very good working condition, they vibrate less, and even they are more efficient and operate better when they are in very good working condition. And then the workers should be offered scheduled breaks, because if they get scheduled breaks, that will give them time to recover and rest and recover from, instead of exposing them to continuous vibration and being, continuously exposed to vibration all the time. And then it's important to train the workers to apply minimum hand grip on the vibrating power tools, because the less power, the less grip they apply to the tools, the less effect the vibration is transmitted on their hands. And then it's important for them to wear warm clothing when they are working, to dress warmly, especially wearing hand gloves when they are working, not surgical gloves, but the work gloves, the thick work gloves, to keep their hands warm and improve circulation when they are working. It's protective against the effects of this condition. So the next condition the next hazard I'm going to talk about is awkward posture. So awkward posture occurs when people deviate from the neutral position. When you do any work or perform any activity in a condition that is not the neutral position of the body part that you're using to do that work. And whenever you perform work in a condition where the muscles or that body part is performing work in a position that is not neutral, the muscles are operating less efficiently. And in that way, you are applying more force that is needed to complete that particular task. So some of the solutions that can be applied to this is, of course, the general duty clause, and then the ergonomic standard as well. And RTD has really, this is one area where they have done well. For instance, this is the worker that is in the center, in the IT center, operations center. So you can see the type of how the computers are placed. So it's well placed at 20 to 28 inches from his eye level, and it's well tilted at 10 to 12 degrees. So this is quite well placed. But the worker is not well positioned. He's twisting. Although he has a good chair, I can't really see the back of this chair to see if he has very good back support, the lumbar support. But he has armrest, and I can really see the leg. But the desk is not a standing desk. It's not adjustable desk. So additional things RTD could do to improve the ergonomics is they could provide adjustable office tables for the workers, which will be good. And then rolling tables rolling chairs are usually better, and then chairs with better leg room for the workers to be able to put their feet down on the ground flat, or have something they could also place their foot on something, like something comfortable. That will also be good. Additional things that could be done for the workers that work in these operate the places where they work on the site is to have install diverters that can convey the materials to the workers so that the workers are not constantly reaching to raise their head up, to avoid reaching overhead, so that they avoid constantly reaching up to avoid neck injury. And then workers could be trained to avoid twisting or bending motions, and to also train them on how to stretch, because stretching helps to ease stiff muscles. And also they could be taught to given offered short breaks also to enable them to rest. Take those mini rests are really very good to help them to rest and allow their muscles to, rest from all the strain. So these are some of the things that could be done to relieve some of these ergonomic hazards from the workers. And I feel that if some of these things are implemented, it could augment some of the good things that RTD is already doing. Because, like I said, they are already doing a lot of good things like that we observed during the visit. So on this note, I must thank you for listening to my presentation and for listening, allowing me to come and visit. And these are some of the citations I have, based on where I got some of my information from. And at this point, I will take your questions. And thank you very much once again.